Hello everyone, welcome back to KXAN Live. I'm Esmeralda Zamora and today we are starting a new segment here with KXAN Live, and that is Inside Austin's Agenda. This segment will be run by our KXAN's Grace Reader. Grace, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing? And talk to me a little bit about what your segment is going to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. We want people to kind of understand what's happening behind closed doors at City Hall, and so we want people to be able to have access to their local leaders, whether that be Travis County, whether that be City of Austin leaders. We're going to talk to City Council member Ryan Alter today in just a couple of minutes, and so we really want people to have an idea of what's happening behind closed doors, behind the scenes here, and we hope that this will give people access to their City Council members, their Travis County commissioners, etc.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that little briefing. Now, without further ado, we're going to welcome our first guest, and we are going to bring him up on Zoom today, and we have him right here. Hi, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Thank you so much for being here, Councilmember Alter. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So this is going to be a bit of a different format. Usually I interview you all the time, and you know that I do interviews really quickly. If you give me what I need in 30 seconds, I'm done and I walk away. If we talk more than 7 minutes, then usually it's sort of a weird or heavy topic. And so this gives us some space to talk a little bit more, to go more in depth on topics. And so we're really excited about this format. And thank you for being my first guest and rolling with the punches here this morning. We do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to be the first guest.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit first. You're now almost 2 years into your first term with Austin City Council. First, I want you to introduce yourself to your constituents. You work for District 5, and if people don't know, that's just south of the river, pretty central. So if you take South Lamar to work every day, they're driving through your district. Tell people first who you are.
So, I was born in South Austin Hospital, lived in this area my whole life, and went to UT for undergrad. I did leave for law school, but came back and have been in public service for my entire career. I went to work at the legislature for 5 sessions, working on a host of issues. Public education and healthcare were some of the big ones that really drew me to that work. Also did some housing policy and whatever else was needed. And then saw this opportunity to go kind of have a more direct impact on my community, and was fortunate enough to win, as you said, almost 2 years ago. And now here at City Council, I have 3 young, wonderful children. They are all under 5 years old, so it's a busy time in our household. But it certainly keeps you grounded, and also a different perspective on what the city, I think, can and should be doing for its residents, for its families. And so it's just a wonderful time to be here, and I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to serve.
So 2 years in now, talk a little bit about, do you have any surprises, or is there anything that you weren't expecting?
I mean, 2 years ago, I certainly wouldn't have said that we were on our 3rd city manager, and some of the events that led up to that. And so I think that has to be the biggest surprise. I think it's been a positive for Austinites. We came in and less than 2 months later decided we needed to make a change, and ultimately did that. Brought in an interim manager who kind of helped us get some things in order. And now our permanent manager, who I've really enjoyed getting to work with, think was a great choice by this council. And so just how that system works, I think it takes some adjusting to. Even as someone who came from government at the state level, people don't really understand or really appreciate the council manager form of government. I know I didn't coming into this role. You see the city council and you think, oh, you are the council member, you can change this or do this, but that's not really how our system of government works. And so really understanding that we set the policy, but the implementation, that's the manager's office. And so it's a delicate push and pull on how you can start a change, but then see it through when it's out of your hands.
And Councilman Peralta, are you hearing yourself double? Because if you are, we're working to fix it behind the scenes. And I know that you usually talk faster than you are, so I assume that you're hearing yourself, and I apologize for that. We're working to fix it and make that a little bit more clear for you.
Well,
I know you're hearing yourself in your ear.
I don't hear myself, but I do hear you double. So everyone's getting double everyone today.
Well, we're working to fix it. Again, this is our first episode, so we appreciate you rolling with the punches. You
Absolutely.
talked a little bit about the 10-1 form of government. Talk to people who don't know what that is about what that is.
So we have a form of government that kind of bifurcates the responsibilities of just getting things done in the city. So there's the city council, the 10 of us plus the mayor, who each regionally represent various areas of the city. And our job is to set policy. We're supposed to decide how, let's say, we want to prioritize things in the budget, or how we want to address a specific issue like homelessness, saying that we want to prioritize this intervention over that intervention, or prioritize this function of our parks over that function of our parks. But then when it comes to the actual implementation of that falls to the manager's office. So we as a council only actually hire and fire 4 people, the city manager being one of them. And so he oversees the entire operation that is the city. And so if, we think that trash service is too slow, we can tell the manager through what is called an item from council, hey, we think that needs to be more periodic. But that's then up to the manager to actually implement and put into place. So we don't have all the levers of power and authority to fix that pothole, or repair that sidewalk, but we can set forth priorities and policies so that those things get done in the community.
People may also not realize that that didn't always used to be this way. It's pretty recently that Austin City Council has this 10-1 form of government. And in fact, someone who is running for mayor right now, Kathy Tovo, used to serve in the old form of government, where we had at-large districts. And so now there's an opportunity for people who perhaps have not been in government to get into government through this new system. But it also means that there are quite a few folks, even this election season, who are running who have never been in local politics before. As someone who's is in this 10-1 system, who ran himself only 2 years ago, do you think that the system is working? Are there unintended consequences of this?
I'd say both. The system was brought forth to have regional single-member districts instead of everyone being at large for a number of reasons. One of the huge benefits of single-member districts is you get a more diverse council. We saw prior to the 10-1 council, there was kind of a gentleman's handshake that a certain council district was going to be reserved for a Latino individual, and a certain council seat for a Black representative. But that was just because, like I said, this unwritten rule was in place. But that wasn't truly representative of the city. You look at the council now, we have the most diverse council this city has ever seen. And that is truly because of the 10-1 system, where council members are now able to represent the communities they come from and look like the communities they come from. So that's a huge benefit. I think you also are able to really address more regional problems. You have more insight to specific issues that may only affect a certain area of the city. What we saw in the previous council, the all at large council, was primarily Central or West Austin individuals were dominated those councils. And so I do think you get a better understanding of the totality of the issues facing the city through single member districts. But to your point, it doesn't come without trade-offs. That regional basis does, I believe, sometimes harm our ability to really see the whole picture and try to offer solutions that may not just benefit your district, but benefit the city as a whole. And you certainly can have times when a policy is put forward that might be beneficial for the entire city, but not necessarily as beneficial for the district you represent. And so you have to weigh, what is my role here? Am I supposed to do something that I believe is going to help the city on a whole, or should I prioritize the needs and wants of the community that I represent? And so um, there is certainly a tension in this system, but by and large, I believe it's been a huge success, and something that has allowed for our community to be better represented.
Can you talk a little bit about, folks may not know, but the way that city council works with elections is that they're staggered so that you don't all of a sudden have 10 new people on the dais plus a new mayor. We know full well, because it has been in the spotlight, that we have a mayoral race going right now, and there are many city council districts also up for grabs. And so you are not one of the city council members who is up for re-election as you're halfway through your first term. But what would you say to the folks who are running for some of the districts that are up for grabs? What would you say that they need to bring forward to be a successful council member?
Yeah, I think this is a job where you have to be able to recognize that it's a learning experience. No one's going to come in and have all the answers and know exactly how everything works. And so being able to really take in early on all the various facets of this city government, and how uh, the needs and the wants of your community, how you can advance those in this system. And that can be frustrating, it can be difficult, but you need someone who's going to be persistent in seeing it all the way through to the end. Like I said, you could pass an item, that doesn't mean it's going to get done. You have to be able to work with staff, work with management, so that ultimately whatever issue is facing your community, you see solved. I think that we have been a very collegial council, a council that works really well together interpersonally. And so I hope and I do believe that we will eventually have new colleagues come to the dais who want to be here, want to work together and find solutions. And so it's a really exciting job. One of the things I have loved about this job is that you get to really see the results, and be able to have a meaningful impact on your local community. You drive down the road and you see that affordable housing project that you had a hand in helping get built, or you're traveling and are on a bridge that was fixed because of work you did, or you're in the park and you're able to enjoy whatever amenity because you were there advocating for your community. And so I love that fact that you get to really see how your local community is benefiting from the work that you're doing.
Not many of us have jobs where we have to have half of our coworkers potentially go up and run for their jobs. So it could really shake up what your life looks like over the next couple of months. And again, talking about that 10-1 system of government, you all recently worked through the budget, and we've talked to you extensively about the budget. But in that specifically, as we know, the city council member, or rather the city manager, brings forward a proposed budget, and you all work through and piece through things that you want cut and added to that budget, and it's an extensive process with a lot of public feedback. Talk to me a little bit about what you specifically got into the budget that you're excited about or that you thought was notable.
So first and foremost, taking a quick step back, the budget process is quite involved. We are an almost $6 billion enterprise budget. And so, people hear that number and certainly understandably say, wow, that's a lot of money. What is all that going to? It's a little misleading because we operate our own utility, our electric utility and our water utilities both make up a significant portion of that budget. When you actually look at the portion of the budget that is what we call the general fund, funded by property taxes or sales taxes, that number is actually 1.4 billion. So quite a bit smaller, less than a quarter of that top line number. And within that, you have almost 2/3 are your public safety departments, police, fire, EMS. And those are generally covered through a contract. So those budgets are pretty much locked in. We are working right now with the Austin Police Department, or Austin Police Association, I should say, to try to reach a contract for the next 4 or 5 years. But at the when once you take that out, now you're talking about a third of a less than a quarter of the budget that you can actually wiggle around and try to make an impact. And so within that narrow slice of the pie, myself and some of my colleagues really dove in on issues related to homelessness and on kind of quality of life issues. And so first and foremost, on the homelessness front, we were able to bring funding for almost 1,000 families to prevent them from becoming homeless altogether. I think prevention is something that we need to be doing more of as a city, so that we're not waiting for someone to sit on the streets for 12 months when they have then undergone that trauma and had oftentimes physical health issues associated with that and become much more expensive to treat and to ultimately get into housing. If we can keep them in their homes, that is better for everybody. So I was really excited about that amendment that I brought forward, as well as amendments that help keep our community safer. I had an amendment that expanded a program that's called MCOT. What that is when you call 911, right now you have the option to choose police, fire, EMS, or a mental health issue. And so through that program, it only operates during the daytime. And so what I brought this amendment to do is expand that 24/7. And so with that, we're going to go from taking about a quarter of the calls that we could divert to this mental health option to be able to serve almost all of those. And that is going to not only have better impacts and results for the individual on the other end of that response, but it's going to free up staff time for our police officers and paramedics to go do other things that we need them to do. There were also other amendments by some of my colleagues, helping boost our shelter system so that people who are experiencing, severe heat or cold, or just find themselves sleeping on the sidewalk, can have a bed and a place to go. And that's incredibly important. Expanding our rapid rehousing program, once again, in the homelessness space. I mentioned quality of life. We passed an amendment to make our parks cleaner and more enjoyable. Unfortunately, I'm sure many of the listeners here have been to a park and seen that trash can overflowing or seen that grass that isn't mowed. And that's because we have been woefully short in our maintenance employees. And so what we did was funded an additional 16 employees to help keep our parks clean, keep the bathrooms clean, just make them more enjoyable and usable for everybody. And that's just a few of the many things. I could go on and on and on. The budget is over 1,000 pages long. So there are a lot of things we're doing as a city, but I'm really excited that we have prioritized people in the budget. We put so much money towards affordable housing, towards keeping our roads and our sidewalk infrastructure up to date and usable. And so it's not everything everybody always wants, but we really did make meaningful impacts on the community through the budget.
We heard that from council members as they talked during from the public as they talked during council meetings, that they really wanted to see some of the things that were in that community investment budget, and you all added quite a bit of those items into the budget itself, and there was a lot of back and forth with the community. But one of the other things we heard from the community, obviously, was about affordability and how much they are having to pay to make a lot of this happen. We did a story a couple weeks ago looking at not only the city of Austin, but also AISD, Travis County, Central Central Health. There are a lot of places that tax folks who are homeowners here in the city of Austin, and property taxes are largely now, because of state legislation, how the city of Austin is able to pull money to make this all happen. So in terms of affordability and looking at the big picture, what do you want Austinites to know in terms of how you all considered and weighed that affordability versus what you're offering them in terms of benefits?
Affordability is crucial. We have to be very conscious of the cost of living here, and we do not want to make decisions that are going to push people out of the city, whether that is a retiree who's on a fixed income or a new graduate from one of our many colleges or university looking for that first home, just got a job and wants to stay here in Austin. And so we have to balance uh, being able to provide a high quality of life through some of the services that should be provided by a city with the cost of doing so. So one of the first things we did, even right before the budget, was we increased the homestead exemption for seniors. So those 65 and older, we set their homestead exemption at a level so that their property tax from the city wouldn't go up. Now, the city's property tax is only about a quarter of the total property tax bill. I think you mentioned it. Most people, the majority of their bill comes from school district taxes, which are
Right.
primarily driven by how much money the state is funding our local school districts. And so when you see significant tax increases, it's largely because of the decisions made by the state to fund our schools or not. And lately, those taxes are going up because we have not seen that funding. There are other taxing districts, as I know. I saw your piece, Central Health, the community college. For everybody's costs of providing services and just doing business have gone up. I think we have all experienced, whether it's in our professional life or daily life, things have gotten more expensive over the past 4 years. What I think is really important for people to keep as a point of context is when the state put in a dramatic change 4 years ago to how we raise revenue. They said a city cannot generate more than 3.5% new revenue from its property taxes. And you often hear people talk about the tax cap. This is what that is. We cannot raise property taxes by more than 3.5%. Over that period of time, if you look at just inflation versus an increase at 3.5%, that 3.5% hasn't even kept up with inflation. We're behind by about 4% just between inflation and how much revenue we could generate. And so we have been very judicious, very lean as a city in figuring out how we can continue to operate and provide the best level of service while also living within the means that we have. And we are going to have to make decisions as a community of what do we expect from our local government and how are we going to pay for that, because we are very limited in the ability to raise the money to do that.
To that point, at what point does this all come to a head? We know that American Rescue Plan Act dollars are running out. That was tens of thousands of dollars injected into local communities. We know that sales tax revenue has not been what was projected by the city of Austin. And so I was a little surprised, frankly, to see that budget go up this year. Obviously, as you said, there's a bunch of factors in that, including the services Austin provides through Austin Energy and water and such. But at what point does that come to a head, and do you all have to make really difficult decisions during budget where you adjust to those cuts and those deficits that are coming?
I think we got a little taste of it this budget, but I think it really comes to a head next year. We have a number of fiscal cliffs that we are facing, primarily because of what you mentioned in the American Rescue Plan Act. We got millions of dollars from the federal government to help stabilize our community, and we invested those dollars in the community, in people. And that had a real meaningful impact. We're seeing the positive results of that. But that funding was temporary. And so we have to figure out what of those investments do we want to continue? And if we do, at the expense of what? Because we have to, at this point, start making trade offs. There's no, we're just going to add a little here and a little here and a little there. we don't have the money to add. We have to start saying we've got to cut these programs if we want to have this other program continue to operate. And so we are really entering I believe, a time of tough budgetary decisions, of true fiscal austerity, and we're gonna have to have some hard conversations as a council, as a community, of where we fit in, and also where our local partners fit in. We have a number of other taxing entities, Central Health as one of them, that is responsible for various facets of public life. And so we need to look as a city to figure out, are we doing some of the things that maybe this other entity is supposed to be doing, and work with them to make sure that everyone is in the proper lane and we're not both duplicating efforts but unnecessarily spending money that could be utilized elsewhere.
Now that you all have shuffled past budget season a little bit, you're now back to regular Austin City Council meetings after the summer break. What are we going to see from you in terms of focus?
I am really focused this fall on, first and foremost, implementing some of the many policies we've been working on. As an office, I have really leaned into homelessness, how we can address the severe issues facing particularly South Austin, the area I represent, and how we can start having the conversations about what our needs are as a city, as a community, to figure out, like I said before, what is our role? How can we fund those things? So really diving into that issue to figure out what kind of tough decisions we're going to make, and be able to have that informed conversation now rather than at the last minute. I've also been very focused on climate and environmental issues, making sure that we as a community are resilient and sustainable. We are not going to solve climate change as the city of Austin, but we are certainly going to feel the results of it. And so we need to make investments right now that make it so that if it's 110 degrees outside, we have places for individuals to go, whether they're on the street or they're a family who can't go down the street to their park because there's no shade there, that they have a place to go enjoy this city. So I think we have to start making those investments today. And I'm going to be working on initiatives like that to be able to really address now what we should be doing locally in the face of climate change that is here. We are certainly also going to have some conversations about something that gets a little weedy and a little technical, but the city is driven by something that is the overarching program. It's the strategic direction. And really what that is a set of goals across all facets of the city of where we want to go. What kinds of goals and strategies do we have to achieve the types of results we want to achieve for our community? And so over the next, I believe, 6 or so months, we're going to be having a bunch of discussions about that. And we had our first one this morning at the Public Health Committee, looking at some of our goals as it relates to homelessness. And are they the right goals? How did we come up with these goals? Are we missing anything? Because if we don't have goals and strategies in place, we're not being very strategic in how we are deploying our resources and operating as a city. You have to know where you're going. And so this is how we set that roadmap. And so I'm going to certainly be very involved there. And last but not least, I am really interested over this next year in looking at the funding for our park system. You know, I mentioned before we were fortunate enough to invest this past budget in more funding for our parks, particularly the maintenance element of our parks. But parks are often kind of the fourth, fifth, or sixth priority when you start balancing the budget. But parks are something that we all love and enjoy every day. And I think everyone should be able to walk out their front door and walk down the street to a park. And so I would really like to look at sustainable funding options for our park systems and how we can make it to so that Austin is the envy of the parks community, because right now we unfortunately have some work to do.
Sure. We have lovely parks here in Austin, and people are very proud of the parks that we do have. Moving on to another council item here. Last week, I reported on council attendance, and I'm not going to make you talk about your coworkers, don't worry, but I would like to ask you if you think that council attendance is important, and should the city of Austin mandate or regulate attendance at its council meetings?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I think that part of this job, you are representing your community, and so that is something that we all take very seriously. And I know that anytime someone is unable to attend, it's more often than not because of a health reason that comes up, or, sometimes this job does require us to travel. And so you'll see people either available for part-time or remotely for a council meeting. I uh, had to take off a couple council meetings because we had a baby, and so I was on parental leave. So things happen in life, and I think that putting forward a blunt attendance requirement might not be the best solution. But ultimately, we are held accountable to the voters, and so if the voters are dissatisfied with the work we're doing, then they get to voice that at the polls. And so I think it is up to every council member to be in good communication with their community. But I know, um, you know, there are things that come up in life. And so we just have to work through that as best we can as a council.
And before we get done here, I want to talk to you about something that we have talked about for almost a year now, and that's the charter review items that obviously there has now been a lawsuit. What we thought was going to end up on folks' November ballot no longer is. So first, can I have you sort of walk through the process where you all started earlier this year and the extensive amount of work that was done? We'll get to what happened this week after you kind of explain that.
Yeah, so the city, you can think of the city's constitution as our charter. We have uh, sets of ordinances, those are kind of our regular laws, but we are governed ultimately by our charter. And in order to amend the charter, we have to go to the voters and ask them to make changes. So the way we typically do that is we form a commission of individuals from the community. Each of us, council members, appoint someone to that commission, and they work together, solicit public feedback on what types of things we might want to see change in the charter. One of the big ones that I brought forward as an item that I wanted them to discuss and review was around petitions. So if somebody wants to, let's say, enact an ordinance or repeal something that has been enacted, our public has the ability to do that. 20,000 individuals can sign a petition, and that is put on the ballot. We've seen that recently with the police oversight, Prop A and Prop B, but we've seen it with the camping ban. And before that, this has origins decades old, but everyone remembers the SOS fight, and the SOS ordinance that we now have was the result of a citizen petition. So we wanted, I and my colleagues wanted this body to look at that process and see if it's still serving the right goal in terms of just how it works. We definitely want to keep the process in place, but is 20,000 the right number? Should it potentially be a percentage instead of that? Or are there other ways that we can achieve meaningful public participation? What the Charter Review Commission ultimately suggested, and I voted for, I thought is a great idea. Rather than tinkering with the number of signatures, why don't we move these elections to November, whether it's a presidential or gubernatorial year, so that we have that full, meaningful public participation at the ballot box. There were also some suggestions about how we can bring additional clarity to this process, making sure that someone files paperwork with the city clerk just letting everybody know, hey, this is our intent to do this petition and this is what it means. Because unfortunately, last time in the police oversight, um, dueling petitions as they were, we saw one of them portray to the public that this is what we're trying to accomplish, but that wasn't actually what was in the language of their ballot measure. And so bringing some transparency to that process, I believe, is really important. There were also a number of other kind of good government elements that were going to be put on the charter election, as well as some technical cleanups. There, believe it or not, is a typo in our charter of someone accidentally keystroked like an asterisk and a J something. But this we have to remove through an election. We can't just delete it ourselves, which is kind of silly, but that's the rules. So, anyways, so there are a number of initiatives, but I'm sure we're about to talk about the fact that we're not going to vote on them.
Yeah, we sure are. You know exactly where I'm going. So there is a group of folks, I'm sure people in Austin know, there's a group of attorneys who pretty regularly sue the city of Austin, and frankly, they've been pretty successful. This is another example of where this group of folks has sued the city of Austin over Public Meetings Act, and they have been successful. Talk a little bit about what that means, what happens next.
So what happened was the posting language for our meeting was not as clear as it should have been. And we ultimately, as you mentioned, we were sued, and a judge decided that we needed to be clearer in what we were doing in terms of telling everybody about that meeting. Understand that, that's fine. The only issue with that is that when we passed it, that was right up against the deadline to put these ballot measures on the ballot. So it's now too late. So we are going to have to revisit these charter amendments and decide when we want to put them on the ballot in the future, whether that's next year, 2026, whenever we feel that's most appropriate. But right now, we will not be moving forward because of that lawsuit.
How disappointing is that for you all to go through all that work and do months of public process and then to have that overturned in the legal system?
Well, it was frustrating. And I think what was most frustrating about it was we had 4 or 5 meetings on these items where people showed up and talked about whether they were for it or against it. This was part, as I mentioned, of an open process with a charter review commission that operated for many months, also soliciting public feedback. And the individuals that sued us on this were the same individuals who were there every meeting talking about these issues. And so I was very upset and frustrated that the public was not going to have the chance to vote on these and make their voice heard and improve our system of government, improve our constitution so that we can better operate as a city. But we also are bound by the law and we need to do it right. And so next time we're going to be absolutely certain that we do.
Well, Councilmember Alter, I really appreciate you being our first guest on this new show and giving a new voice and a new space to be able to hear more from you all, from you, your colleagues, from Travis County Commissioners down the street. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and walking us through some of what's happening in Austin right now.
Absolutely. Well, I have loved being on here, and I can't wait to listen as it progresses over the next months and years to come.
You and me both. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Well, thank you so much, Grace, for showing us how we're going to be having this segment over and over bi-weekly, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Tell me a little bit about what other members or what other city officials we'll be talking to throughout this journey.
Well, we're heading into election season, so that's going to be a big part of this. Is we're going to be making sure that people are educated on what's going to be coming in November. We have a big election locally in November 5th, and so heading into election season, you're going to hear a whole lot about that. So stay tuned as we bring you who you're going to be voting on.
Yes, and remember again, was our first episode of this segment. So if we had a little hiccups, bear with us. We will make sure not to have them on our next one. Thank you for bringing this wonderful guest on with us, and thank you for joining us here on KXAN Live for a new segment.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you all today on KXAN Live. Remember, this is going to be happening bi-weekly, and if you want to find more information on how you can join, just visit our website, kxan.com, and Grace will be putting an article each day that this segment airs. Again, I'm Esmeralda Zamora, and this was KXAN Live.
Yay.